They asked them to denounce the violence, to condemn the violence, and also to denounce socialism, communism, and Marxism. And he said, no. He said, how can you negotiate with a man who you've shackled? You can't fucking tell me to make these kinds of takes. Like, I'm in prison.
Barnaby, the bombing of this hospital has had an incredible amount of impact, regardless of what caused it. But what's your take on this? Do you have an interpretation?
Israel ordered 22 hospitals evacuated. The World Health Organization called that a death sentence for patients in those hospitals who couldn't be moved and so were being left to die. One of the hospitals that Israel ordered evacuated was the hospital that has now been bombed. So Israel said it was going to bomb hospitals. Then a hospital got bombed. Israel's dropped more bombs on Gaza this week than America dropped on Afghanistan in the first year of their occupation of Afghanistan in 2001. Fadi Diab, a priest in Ramallah, said, we hold the occupying power responsible. If it's good enough for a priest, it's good enough for me. And we know that Israel continues to block electricity from baby incubators and dialysis patients. We know that Israel continues to block water from surgeons and elderly people. I mean, people in Gaza don't have access to clean water, food from survivors. And we know that Israel bombs roads after it tells people to flee along those roads. We also know that on October the 14th, Israel targeted ambulances. And we know that before this bombing, Israel had already killed 28 medical staff in Gaza. We know too, as you said, that part of the Israeli playbook is to lie about the attacks, the murders. It doesn't please me to say this. In 1996, Israel shelled a UN compound in Lebanon, blamed it on others. It wasn't true. In 2006, Israel murdered an entire family on a beach in Gaza. The IDF had a quick investigation that said the IDF wasn't responsible. It wasn't true. In 2014, Mark Regev, we've seen him again on our TV screens recently, claimed that UNRWA sites, that's UN Refugee and Works Agency sites, were used to launch missiles. The UN investigated, it wasn't true. Last year, Israeli forces murdered Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, blamed Palestinians. It wasn't true. Journalists can't really investigate what's going on in Gaza.
You know what the craziest part is? This dude is obviously 100% right. And he just dropped a shit ton of like moments where Israel has done this exact same thing. And it's not even half of it. Like, that's the craziest. Like, off the top of my mind, immediately I can think of the one time that they bombed a cemetery, for example, which I believe he didn't even bring up. And a couple of years prior, where they killed a bunch of kids and then immediately said it was Islamic Jihad. And then later turned around and were like, oh, actually, it wasn't. It was us. And also, we're not actually investigating anybody and no one is going to jail. So there are so many examples of Israel doing this and then claiming that it's actually the Islamic Jihad or Hamas that did it so many times over that, like, even when you drop 10 in a row, it's nowhere near the entirety of the situation.
Because even the Washington Post, which is not, I tell you, a friend of the Palestinian people, says it is, quote, becoming impossible to report from Gaza under the conditions of siege and bombardment that Israel has established. So part of what concerns me here, looking at the Western media, because this whole brutal siege and bombardment campaign by Israel has been an object lesson in the racism that structures everything in our media ecosystem. It has been quite, well, I want to say extraordinary, but I haven't even been that surprised to watch Western journalists rush to report an old blood libel, to rush to report that 40 babies were beheaded by bloodthirsty, savage Palestinians, even though it later turned out there wasn't much evidence for it, completely ignore, by the way, Hamas's accounts of what happened in their attack and just report the Israeli accounts. But then when Israel says, despite this record of lying, when Israel says that they're not sure who bombed this hospital or blames Palestinians for killing their own children, journalists rush to say, of course, we must be measured and take them seriously, including, I should say, some left-wing journalists. And that's concerning to people because it seems to be a kind of double standard that is reeks of racism. Raz Segal, the Israeli genocide expert, is calling what happens in Gaza a textbook case of genocide now. 800 legal scholars have written that they are, quote, compelled to sound the alarm about the possibility of genocide.
300 Holocaust survivors and their descendants took out a full-page ad in the New York Times saying that this is a genocide, by the way. Not just scholars. New York Times runs an ad from Holocaust survivors condemning Israel attacking Elie Wiesel. The statement was signed by more than 300 people and issued a response to an ad by Elie Wiesel. Jewish survivors and descendants of survivors and victims of Nazi genocide unequivocally condemn the massacre of Palestinians in Gaza. Anyone that tries to fucking tell you, that one, anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are alike is a fucking liar, okay? Anyone that tries to tell you that there isn't enough evidence is either completely fucking misinformed or a liar, okay? It's crazy. There is no, like, there are so many people out there, who demonstrate the moral clarity that they have. So many activists, so many fucking writers, so many PhDs, scholars, historians that tell you exactly what the fuck is going on, but you never hear from them in the media. Never. Those who survived the Holocaust scholars, Israeli scholars. The ANC also considers Israel's treatment of Palestinians to be apartheid. If there's anybody that knows about the apartheid, it's the ANC. Yes. The worst part is it takes like 15 minutes maximum of research and critical thinking to find out the truth about what's happening here. The writing is on the wall and it's written openly and plainly. No, but most people don't do that. Most people don't want to fucking look at the truth. They just want to be blinded.
In Gaza, it is clear that Israel is targeting civilians. They've targeted residential buildings, they've targeted journalists, they've targeted medics and medical facilities. This isn't the first case. The question I think should ask is why they're doing this. Why this brutal blanket campaign, cutting off water. If you didn't want to target civilians, you wouldn't cut off water and you wouldn't cut off fuel. Why are they doing it? They don't need to. They have an Iron Dome missile defense system that means that most missiles that Palestinians fire into Israel don't reach targets. They could negotiate the release of hostages. There are 6,000 Palestinian prisoners languishing in Israeli jails without receiving fair trials, serious allegations of torture, which we rarely hear about on the news, though we hear much about Israeli hostages in Gaza. They could negotiate for the release of their hostages. Instead, they're bombing Gaza and killing, by some reports, some of their own hostages. This won't, of course, destroy Hamas. When you carpet bomb people who are living under a colonial siege and constant bombardment, the only effect it can have is to strengthen people's fury, anger, and resolve to resist the colonizing power. So, of course, it won't break resistance. Even if they were to destroy the Hamas infrastructure, something else would emerge in its place. So why? Why are they doing this? It's not, by the way, because Hamas caused the problem, because in the West Bank, where there is no Hamas regime, settlers have attacked funerals in the last week and launched attacks on Palestinian villages, killing parents and children. And the IDF has shot and killed 62 Palestinians in the last week, when I last checked, in the West Bank, which is a place that does not have a Hamas government. And before this latest massacre, 2023 was already the deadliest year on record for children in the West Bank, with one child murdered every week by Israeli forces. So it isn't because there's a resistance enclave that Israel's violent. It seems to have this lashing out violent impulse regardless. The reason is that it's the logic of the colonizer. The reason is that Israelis know deep down, and I'm speaking here of some of my own family members, so it pains me to say it, but they know deep down that they are living in other people's stolen homes. They know that they are living in a state that was premised on an act of ethnic cleansing when 700,000 Palestinians were driven from their homes. That's why Gaza is so densely populated, because most of the Palestinians living in Gaza aren't from Gaza. They're refugees penned in there because they were chased out of other parts of Israel. And that's why the important thing to do now is not simply to call for peace, not simply to call for the end of this massacre, though that is crucial, but to understand that we want a world in which people don't live penned into an open-air prison because they're chased from their homes, to call not simply for peace but for freedom, and to say when we see people partying at a rave and then being killed by Hamas operatives, that they were partying 5 miles away from an open-air prison. If you move 5 miles from where those people were partying in Israel to Gaza, life expectancy drops 10 years. We don't just want peace and the return of a world in which that is the case. We desperately want people all over the world, in our millions, for freedom, for everyone to be able to live a life of freedom and dignity. And that's why we want victory for the Palestinian people.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with most of that. I suppose on this question of verification, I mean, you've sort of then given a political position, which I'm very sympathetic towards. When it comes to, do you just say, okay.
Didn't he also cook Owen Jones and shit on this too? I think. I didn't watch this entire interview, but I think he was like shitting on Owen Jones as well, because I think Owen Jones was like saying that, yeah, you know what, I'm sorry or something. Owen Jones is pro-Palestine too, but I think he was like shitting on some members of the British left, which are very few of out there anyway, who were offering concessions overall to some of the narrative that was being presented. Like, it's not an easy position to maintain. People try to make it as hard as fucking humanly possible towards you when you say, like, I feel like I'm losing my fucking mind here. But of course, until a third-party independent verification comes through with, like, the United Nations, for example, that tells me that this was not an Israeli strike, I'm going to maintain that it's like a part of the 6,000 fucking bombs that they had dropped prior. You know what I mean? Like, it blows my mind that everybody so quickly was like, oh, dude, we're so sorry. I can't believe you fucked up, and didn't just believe the IDF immediately when there's not enough evidence to suggest that it's actually you should have just like believed exactly what you should believe exactly what the IDF said in this situation. Like, why would I not assume that it's Israel? What the fuck? They were literally bombing that area. Anyway, I don't know if he. I don't know if he is referring to that, or I don't know what he's
this was an Israeli airstrike. I will take you back. I mean, in what you just said, you were saying there are many journalists who are willing to put on their front pages that 40 babies were beheaded with zero evidence.
Nobody said that. People just wanted to wait for more information to come out. Brother, come on, brother, man. Like, please, that's not what's going on right now, okay? There is literally still not enough evidence to conclusively say that this was a Islamic Jihad rocket, and yet people have already moved on that it 100% was that, and have demanded the media offer retractions and apologies, which the media has given retractions and apologies on, and now you're in here being like, nah, people just want for more information to come out. Okay, more information came out. Do you think that it's definitively an Islamic Jihad rocket? Quit stalling, play Rust. Okay, shut the fuck up, idiot.
And then, we did a video sort of critiquing that, saying there's no verification for this. We haven't really covered any of the stuff which is being put out by people who have gone on record and sort of said, oh, we saw this and that brutality in the kibbutzes, because I think if it's just based on one or two sort of eyewitnesses who also probably have some political prejudices themselves, that's not good enough for us to report it. So then there is a similar situation here now, whereby if there are doubts, then you should say, it appears to be this, or it appears to be that. And to be honest, that shouldn't have that much impact on the politics of all of this, because we know that Israel is definitely doing enough bad stuff to not have to necessarily rule out the possibility that this could have been something else. I mean, I think we will see, more forensic evidence from sort of people over the next days and weeks. Because to me, I think both options are possible, right? I don't think my solidarity with Palestinian people is dependent on which one of these is true, but both to me do seem possible.
That's very important. That's also very important. It's like, what do you think? I'm just be like, oh, fuck, man. Well, I guess I really don't give a shit about Palestinian emancipation now, because, like, it turns out it was an Islamic Jihad rocket that killed, out of the 5,000 people that died, 500 of them were killed by an Islamic Jihad rocket. So I guess, like, I don't care anymore, Like, is that, like, what do people think is going to happen? Do you think that that's what's the perspective here? Like, all of a sudden, like, is my position on the matter, it's bad when Palestinian children and Israeli children are murdered? Or is my position on the matter, it's only bad if Palestinian Islamist groups are murdering people, whether it be Israeli children or Palestinian children? Like, when Israel kills children, it's fine. It's totally fine and it's totally valid. Like, is that the perspective that we have here? Is that what I should be saying? I'm a little confused by it. It's like, is Netanyahu upset that they didn't get to those Palestinians first then, if what they say is true? It's odd.
And I do think that sort of as journalists, not just as political activists, you do have to sort of take account of the fact that verification does matter. Obviously, you need to, uphold both sides to that standard. I mean, what do you make of that?
I think you should think about the context of the last week and a half in which we have witnessed the insidious dehumanization of the Palestinian people. They beheaded 40 babies, they blew up their own hospital, and they have been compared, including by some commentators on the British left, to Nazis and pogromists.
Who are you talking about here? On the,
if you want names, Paul Mason says that compares Palestinian.
Okay, this one was a bad take because, like, is Paul Mason a leftist, dog? What the fuck? When is he? Is he even a leftist? Am I crazy? Like, that part I was like, when I heard that, I was like, what? Like, Owen Jones, I understand. Like, he's pro-Palestinian. Maybe he went a little far. I don't know. I don't know what he said. I haven't really said anything. But I like, has Paul Mason been a leftist for a while? I feel like, anyway.
Opinions breaking out of a cage and entering Israel as part of a guerrilla war when they've been left with no negotiations process, no precise weapons guided missile technology. He compares them to carrying out pogroms, which is an insult both to Palestinians in a cage and to my ancestors who were genuine victims of pogroms and weren't colonial settlers who'd stolen people's land. I saw Owen Jones saying if we really want to...
He's a self-proclaimed social democrat. Yeah, but he's like one of those guys. He's like a fucking incredibly, isn't he like a super pro NATO guy? I'm in this unique position where I am not in favor of the Russian government or its actions in any meaningful capacity, but also simultaneously, I'm not going to sit here and be like the greatest anti-socialist, militarized, fascist-backed movement that basically has created and made permanent the American military dominance globally is actually a good thing. Okay. Like I'm not pro Russia by any means. I think that there were plenty of issues within the USSR as well, but it's fucking wild to just be like, yeah, I love NATO. I think NATO is fucking sick. It's insane. You do not know anything about the history of NATO, how it was developed, who was in positions of power at key moments, including literal fucking Nazi generals, straight up, okay? And what position NATO plays in the world. It's just, it blows my mind. It blows my fucking mind, dude. I mean, think about the ultra-nationalists in Turkey. You're stupid. I know, I'm the stupidest idiot, dude. You cannot get me to agree with NATO. I've seen what they've done in Libya. I've seen what it did in Afghanistan. I've seen what NATO has done internally in the European countries that was brought into NATO. It's just impossible for me to look at all of that death and destruction and destabilization and defense that NATO has done for fascists and fascist movements, like a direct revitalization of like fascism under the auspices of neoliberalism. I can't look at that and go, man, it's so sick. It's so sick. This organization that was propped up specifically to murder socialists in post-World War II European nation states that were in the sphere of Western influence. Like, that's so fucking cool. I love that group. I'm a communist, by the way. I'm a socialist, by the way, but I fucking love NATO. It's just like, it doesn't make sense.
To name names, I saw Owen Jones talking about the Hamas attack as the most Jews dying since the Holocaust. Again, deeply, deeply insulting, both to Palestinians and to those who were murdered in the Holocaust. So that kind of dehumanization functions to legitimate the massacre of people because it makes these people, Palestinians, something disgusting and bigoted and savage and violent. And there's just a very long history of this that you should be aware of. There's a very long history of when the colonized strike back and say very clearly that they're striking back for freedom and dignity. history, they are discussed instead as bloodthirsty savages who have a lust for chaos and destruction, and that's why they're fighting. And that kind of language functions to legitimate the colonial violence that is then meted out to them. So when a hospital is blown up and the Israeli state says it was the Palestinians, they killed their own children, you should be aware that it's not simply unbiased journalistic integrity to report that claim. There's a deep, very, very violent ideological pressure at work in that claim. And it troubles me. It troubles me because I am the descendant of people who for 2,000 years, white Christian Europe excluded and said eventually was subhuman Jews. And so I see this language when Israelis talk about human animals, when Israelis talk about children of darkness, as Netanyahu did, when Israelis talk about the law of the jungle. This is the language that was developed to exclude and murder and persecute my people, Jews. It was then used across Africa and Asia and South America to exclude and murder and brutalize people. Israel is just the latest iteration of violent colonial Western power. It's no surprise that America and Britain support it. They developed that kind of racist language, and they're still drowning thousands of people every year in the Mediterranean. So that's the kind of racist world order we live in, and that's the kind of racist world order that allows Israeli politicians to be blasé about the claim that Palestinians kill their own children.
I just feel like you're conflating quite a lot of things there. So you're conflating sort of the Palestinian government, not the Israeli government calling Palestinians children. And I mean, I wouldn't use this sort of Holocaust comparison, but I suppose what people were talking about there, and what I assume Owen was talking about there, is why people are upset about this, why people would be upset by a lot of...
Listen, Michael Walker is very good. You guys, listen. There are some things, stop, before getting mad at him, okay? People are yelling, you are bullshit the fuck up. I think you guys don't understand something. You're anonymous here. You're chatting up a fucking storm. There are certain things that you can't say, okay? There are certain things that Felix says, for example, or Noah says, that I will never say, okay? Barnaby can say certain things. I cannot. At the end of the day, like, I don't think it's appropriate for Michael Walker to unconditionally agree with Barnaby in this circumstance, because it will be used against them, and it will be used against the advocacy for Palestinians. Okay, you can't do that. You have to reel them in that situation. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're. It doesn't matter if you're correct. You know, certain parts of the optics conversation have to be reeled in. I know it's a genocide. I say it unconditionally, okay? But, you know,
of civilians getting killed in Israel, you know, even though you say there was some unfairness to the fact that people can party next to the Gaza wall, but still, I think people should...
What am I hearing from Hasan right now? What do you mean, dude? Listen, I am going to always be very careful about what I talk about, specifically because I do not want I don't want anyone to ever, assume that I'm anti-Semitic, which I'm not. But also on top of that, I don't want to ever have my words be used, not against me, because that happens all the fucking time, but my words be used against the advocacy that I make, the advocacy for Palestinians. That's it.
Put forward some sympathy to people who are just going to a party and the parents of those people who are just going to a party. And I suppose I'm not sure if you're almost disagreeing with that.
Well, I don't think that anyone dying is ever a good thing. I think that anyone dying is a tragedy. I have never been deliberately starved by a colonial power that chased me from my land, so I try not to judge the actions of people who have been in that position. I live in Britain, where our government sends weapons to Israel. What we can do is not spend our time condemning and attacking the actions of the people killed with the bombs that our taxes fund, but instead try to ensure that our taxes no longer fund those bombs. We all celebrate Nelson Mandela. The majority of people killed by the ANC in their armed struggle campaign were civilians. The ANC felt that armed struggle campaign was necessary to end a system of racist dehumanization in South Africa. Mandela was called a terrorist for it and attacked for it. There's a long history of this kind of thing. I'm concerned with stopping our money going to murdering Palestinian men, women, and children. And I think that time spent attacking Palestinians for the military strategies that they choose is frankly offensive and insulting, given that none of us have ever lived for decades under a occupation.
He's right about that.
I mean, so as far as I understand it, though, the ANC example was quite different. I think they didn't kill that many. I think it was sort of in the low hundreds over the whole campaign. Then they ended up sort of renouncing it, and I suppose part of the anti
Michael Walker is wrong about that. They did not. They literally only did it after the apartheid had ended. And then the peaceful reconciliation campaign started by Nelson Mandela. But Nelson Mandela was approached numerous times in prison under the condition that he will literally be able to have his freedom again as long as he fucking denounces the violence on the fucking streets. And he said no. They extended his prison sentence by 5 fucking years twice. So he stayed in prison for 10 extra fucking years because he refused to condemn the violence. This is a fact that many people forget. Many people forget this fact. It is revisionist, is historically revisionist. Okay? They asked them to denounce the violence, to condemn the violence, and also to denounce socialism, communism, and Marxism. And he said, no. He said, how can you negotiate with a man who you've shackled? You can't fucking tell me to make these kinds of takes. Like, I'm in prison. I'm in fucking prison.
Apartheid struggle was in a way about sort of building links to, I mean, obviously it was outside pressure, it was rebellion, it was a huge boycott and sanctions from the outside, which is why I'm in favor of BDS. But I don't think they sort of...
By the way, I don't know if people know this, but like, just, I maybe don't Google it, but there is a concept called necklacing. Okay, so I feel weird talking about this even, but I don't think a lot of white people are aware, or I guess like they forgot. Okay, it's the ANC didn't just bomb positions where civilians were. They engaged in a practice called necklacing. This is true. A very brutal, horrifying practice. One of the many different methods fighting against apartheid. I will tell you what it is. It was also not just for white men, but who supported the apartheid system, but also even for those deemed as traitors of the black community as well, as far as I understand. They would wrap up people in a car tire, douse them with gasoline, and set them on fire. This is one of the practices that Nelson Mandela, or Nelson Mandela's ANC, engaged in their anti-apartheid struggle. There's a reason why you don't think about that when you're talking about the apartheid. Because at the end of the fucking day, yes, it was mostly used in riots by mobs, but at the end of the fucking day, the reason why you don't think about that or don't even fucking know about that, okay, is because, yes, of course the people that were under an apartheid regime engaged in savagery, okay, in savage acts. Of course they did. Of course, their entire existence was subjugation. Every moment that they lived under a violent, oppressive apartheid structure. It was gruesome. Okay? My point is, when all is said and done, you don't look back at the individual gruesome acts committed by the ANC. You look at the apartheid as the overarching system of violence. Okay? And it took years and years to get to that point. It's not like it started off like that. It started off with peaceful acts of civil disobedience. I've talked about this. They thought, before switching to more violent methods, that they tried protesting. They thought that they could do civil disobedience and have and overwhelm the prison systems. They were wrong. It didn't work. You're finally growing some brain cells, says, what? You're finally growing some brain cells. Thanks, man. This is why when Piers Morgan brought up Mandela as a figure to look to, it was hilarious. Exactly. Exactly. And the way to end that violence is not by tightening the vice grip and tightening the conditions of oppression. That did not end the apartheid. The apartheid ended through politics, through political change. And that is precisely the situation at hand here in the Israeli apartheid. You cannot end an apartheid regime by continuing to increase the violence that you subject the people under the apartheid regime to. You can only end it through a conciliatory political move in the right direction towards peace.
Necessarily went to things that killed lots of people. Like, to me, there's not only moral problems with that, it seems a bit strategically odd. I suppose strategically that makes sense if you're going for this sort of Algeria model, which is you're trying to scare people so much that they sort of leave your land and you can take it back. I mean, potentially that's what people are going for. I'm just not sure if that's particularly realistic in this situation, because I think, you know, the people of Israel are somewhat different to the French Algerians who are in Algeria.
Yeah, French people in Algeria could always go back to France. There's a lot of Israeli people in Israel that can't go back to, like, Germany. You know what I mean? Like, that is technically true. French people were like, oh, fuck this, I'm going back to France. You know what I mean? But you can't really do that in Israel. These people live there. This is their land at this point. It was stolen. It was stolen through violence. But it's not the same. I just hope the chat with your mods worked. And they started banning people as freely as they do for people who disagree with you. When they start saying anti-semiotic things, first of all, it's anti-Semitic things. And secondly, we fucking ban people for anti-Semitism way before this conversation. And we will continue to ban people for anti-Semitism way after you're fucking dead and gone in this chat. Okay, Mr. Anti-Semiotic. The fuck?
I really, really, really don't want people to be killed.
Look at this guy, bro. Why are you going through the mental gymnastics trying to claim that the idea of bombing the hospital and the evidence points towards a Hamas rocket? I swear to God, dude, these people don't give a shit about anything. They're just like, I can't do this anymore. Brother, you're right. Okay, you got me. Yes, it definitely, I believe the IDF still did not execute Shireen Abu Akleh. I believe the IDF did not execute those children with a bomb, with a strike on the cemetery. I believe the IDF whenever they tell me. I don't even believe the 6,000 rockets that IDF dropped in Gaza over the course of the past week before. I don't know how many rockets we're at now. I believe that those were all actually rocket misfires. You got it. How stupid of me to think that out of the 6,000 rockets that they dropped, the 6,001st one was not the IDF. You fucking got me. You did it. All of those people, 5,000 people so far, 2,000 children dead, actually not dead. Okay, not dead. They're actually alive. They're very much alive. And you're right. You're right. It's all one big phony show that they're playing over there. Dead babies. All of them are actually paid actors. They're all Hamas. It's all Pallywood. You fucking got it. I am in denial of everything. I'm in denial of everything that I've ever seen. I'm in denial of everything that I've ever read. I'm in denial of what Holocaust scholars are saying. I'm in denial of what Israeli scholars are saying about the situation on the ground. You got it. You did it. 700,000 people dispelled or expelled from their homes in the Nakba. Not true. Didn't happen. Why? Hamas. Hamas actually did that. You got it. Anyway, let's continue. You got it. You did it. It's all fake. Look, let me show you how fake this is, dude. Dude, imagine, I guess the billions of dollars that have gone to UNRWA has actually gone to Palestinian CGI. Look at this. Al-Zahar area of central Gaza totally wiped out in the aftermath of an Israeli bombing. What a lie. What a disgusting lie told by Times of Gaza. Once again, I mean, it's all CGI. Everybody knows it. There's actually, contrary to what you believe is happening here, there's actually a row of hotels there, okay? High-class hotels and casinos. People are actually having so much fun in Gaza. You should go there. You should try and fly into the you know, there's an airport there. Or you're going to fucking hell for saying Pallywood. Yeah, I mean, anyone who says it unironically should actually, I mean, should go to hell 100%. Yeah. Hamas cut the water. Hamas cut the food. Hamas cut the electricity. The UNRWA certificate confirming my family's 1948 displacement is Photoshop. Lol, what the fuck? Yeah, sorry. This guy's, this one Redditor actually nailed it. The truth of the matter. Every single formative Holocaust historian, genocide scholar, academics, historians across the board, they all are wrong. Yeah. Look. Oh, look at that. Another fake Unreal Engine footage, you know? It's just, it's crazy. The guy that took this is dead, by the way. Okay? He's dead. The guy that took this photo is fucking dead. He was murdered. He was murdered. Go ahead. That's fake too, right? That's probably fake, right? You people are genocide deniers. Okay? You are. You're a piece of shit. You're no different than the fucking Nazi scumbags that engage in this exact same bullshit. Okay? You're no different. Your target is Arabs and Palestinians and Muslims, so they're not human, they're subhuman, right? So it must be fake. I don't know how you can live with yourselves, man. I don't. I guess it's more comfortable to like not know the truth. That's what it is.
At music festivals. I want a world in which, frankly, I really, really like music festivals. I want a world in which we can all dance at music festivals and be free. I don't want a world in which people dance at music festivals 5 miles away from an open-air prison camp in which more than half the population is food insecure, in which in this territory, Gaza, which was partly dependent on fishing, 85% of its fishing waters are controlled by Israel, and every single aspect of the movement of people in the territory is so controlled by Israel that they can cut off food and water and fuel at will. I don't think that's a normal situation that should be allowed to continue. I want there to be strikes and non-violent resistance and no one to be harmed in the march to freedom. Of course I want that. Everyone wants that. But in a situation in which for decades the Israeli state has occupied and oppressed and besieged and bombarded Palestinians, for people in the West who have not been in that position to spend their time condemning the things that Palestinians do when our governments fund the Israeli war machine, I just think it's the wrong choice of our attention. I think that's wrong. And I think that to compare Palestinians, and you said you wouldn't do this, but to compare Palestinians to anti-Semitic persecutors of Jews who rounded us up just for living in Europe and put us eventually in gas chambers, to compare, to tar Europe's shame at its failure to prevent centuries of anti-Semitism and to accuse Palestinians who did not carry out the Holocaust, Europeans did, to accuse Palestinians of that because they just want to live in peace and freedom, I think it's just frankly sickening. It genuinely sickens me. It's an insult to generations of my family members who were butchered by the same kind of brutality and exclusion that said some people are human animals that now we see carried out by the state of Israel. Yes, those people in the state of Israel are Jews, but they've taken on the European Gentiles' way of thinking about the world. They've taken on all the violence that they call Western civilization, which says some people have rights and other people don't. And so just as we had to break the back of Tsarism, and just as we had to break the back of every anti-Semitic regime, and just as we had to break the back of European colonialism everywhere, we have to break the back of the Zionist state so that everyone can be free. Everyone can live in peace and freedom. But, like Palestinians, I don't know what Palestinians are supposed to do. Israel was about to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. Israel has completely divided the Palestinian liberation movement so that in the West Bank, they have a kind of puppet regime in the Palestinian Authority, which has guns that it doesn't turn on the Israeli state, but on Palestinian protesters sympathizing with Gaza. The Palestinian movement is divided. It doesn't have regional allies, very few regional allies. The situation is pretty brutal, and Palestinians are trying to find a way to march for freedom. And when they marched peacefully a few years ago up to the wall that Israel has constructed to keep them from their homes, Israel shot and killed them. When they tried to be Gandhi, and Israel shot and killed them.
Well, I mean, they also shot and killed a bunch of Gandhi's people, and he still kept on being Gandhi. But I'm not saying we should judge them for that. I suppose I think where we differ is I agree the absolute focus should be on the crimes of Israel because they are the occupying power. That's what we do on this show. We spend 95% of our time talking about that. I do think on the left there is a sort of reluctance to say, well, if you then spend 5% of your time saying, I also think that massacring people at a music festival is wrong, you are somehow undermining the Palestinian cause. I think we disagree on that, but we should move on. I'm sure we will come back to similar issues.
He's not a piece of shit. Dude, no. Stop yelling at Michael Walker, okay? He's not. He's a good dude. Navarre Media is good. They're good dudes.